when David joined us 6 years ago as our bibliographer. It's just been a blessing to have him here. He's such an asset to the organization. Prior to joining the center, David was a senior staff journalist with the BBC News, among many other roles he played there. He had previously been deputy curator of the Jewish Museum in London. He writes regularly for the Digital Yiddish Theater Project and is the author of Yiddish Theater in London, along with numerous other articles related to Yiddish literature and culture. He also happens to be the great-grandson of the famous writer Sholem Asch, about whom he has written widely, so he comes by this authentically. David is passionate about Yiddish culture, and it's really hard to imagine someone who is better situated and equipped to curate this new exhibition here at the center. Right now, he is working on this round the clock, and that is seriously not an exaggeration, to ensure that we open on October 15th, but he's taking a brief break to tell you about why you won't want to miss coming back to see the exhibit, either when it opens on October 15th. We're going to have a big festive opening here. And in fact, special breaking news, Frank London will be here as part of that opening day. So you really won't want to miss the opening. But if you do miss the opening, the exhibit's going to be up for many, many years. So we'll look forward to having you come back and see it. So without further ado, I bring you David Mazower.
So am I on? Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you, Susan.
I forgot something really important. I've heard that the sponsors for this concert today are here, and I'm sorry, David.
Yes, of course.
But I don't want to miss acknowledging them and thanking them. This talk was made possible by Carole Kessler Roth and Larry Roth in loving memory of Carole's father, Leo Kessler, a graduate of the Jewish Teachers Seminary in New York, whom we lost too soon. Carole and Larry, can you tell us where you are? There you are. Sorry, it just fell off my radar, but I'm very grateful.
Sorry. Sure. Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks to you all for coming. How many of you are members of the center and supporters? Oh, a lot. So really, everything you're going to see and everything I'm talking about is made possible by you. So thank you very much. And thanks to all my colleagues at the center, Aaron, Susan, Lisa Newman, Jeff Hayes, who are part of our core team, my 3 fellows this year who've been an extraordinary asset in bibliography and doing a ton of translation, research, and writing. So the creative team has been at full speed for, well, many years, but intensively over the last many months. And what I want to do today is show you enough to whet your appetite to come back in October, but not show you everything, obviously. So this really, you know, the whole thing, the reason the repository is empty of books, everything I'm going to talk about goes back to really the conversations that I had with Aaron and Susan 2016 and 2017 when we talked about me joining the book center, and they said, we have a project. We have this, this thing we call the Big Book in one of the galleries up at the top walkway. Some of you might remember that, an enormous sort of metal open book frame that talked to you and projected things. And they said, you know, it's had its day. We want to replace it. So can you come up with something about American Yiddish literature that we can put in that room and replace it? And like an idiot, I said yes. If anyone asks you to curate a major exhibit, just say no. Always say no. But I said yes, because I hadn't learned any wisdom, and you know, I tend to say yes to things. And what they didn't know was that this was going to blow $1 million hole in the book center's. But then my sort of journey into Yiddish really came through an entirely different route, and that was getting to know the last of the professional Yiddish actors in London in the when would it have been, 1980s, when I curated a big exhibition on Yiddish theatre in London when I was working at the Jewish Museum. And that was a side of Yiddish life and Jewish life, sort of a working class, very authentically traditional Jewish and Yiddish cultural tradition, but again, a theatrical, cosmopolitan world of actors who thought nothing of traveling to Buenos Aires, or I even accompanied them. I played piano. When they found out I played piano, they brought me in, and I went to Antwerp and Paris and Leeds and Liverpool with them playing. And so again, I sort of caught the tail end of this world of professional Yiddish theatre, which was very conscious of itself as being in the tradition from Goldfaden back to the 1870s. And I was fascinated by that. I began to write about Yiddish theatre, research Yiddish theatre. And so popular Yiddish culture has always been something that I'm super interested in. And so in a way, this offer, or the job offer from Aaron and Susan, to let me loose on the world of modern Yiddish culture for the benefit of this exhibition was just a dream come true. And as I sort of immerse myself more and more, I thought two things really. One is that I knew I would learn a lot along the way, which I have. I know a great deal more, and I also know a lot about what we don't know. I know the things we don't know through these sort of 5 years of working on this. And the prospect of sharing it with people was very, very attractive. So yeah, I knew I would learn a lot and sort of be able to share my passion and excitement for this global world in all its variety and splendor. And I was thinking about this last night. How many of you were at the Nigunim concert? Lots. I mean, it made such an impression on me. There was such a sort of majesty and grandeur about their performance and about everything that's informed their playing, all the knowledge, that's, the folk knowledge and the musical knowledge that's gone into that. And in some sense, music expresses the values and the character and the majesty of this culture almost better than anything, I think, when it's done so well. But the challenge for us is, what do we do from our resources? So what I want to do very quickly is brainstorm with you. And we'll brainstorm, and then we'll talk about some of this, or bear some of these things in mind as we go through. So two things. One, what would you want or expect to see in an exhibition called Yiddish: A Global Culture? Just throw some things at me and we'll put them on the board. Multimedia. Multimedia? Oh dear. Okay. Yeah, keep throwing them. I mean, they can be specific authors, they can be subjects, they can be concepts, anything you would be interested to see.
Pale of Settlement.
Sorry?
Pale of Settlement.
Pale of Settlement. Nice. Yeah.
Laughter for two. Comedy.
Okay.
Resilience.
Comedy, I'll put those together. Laughter. Sorry, my writing is going to be terrible. Laughter through tears. Resilience, somebody said. I like that.
Graphic.
Music. Graphics, what do you mean?
Poster design, artists.
Oh, this was not a plant. Okay. Graphics, yeah.
Social movement.
Yeah. Okay. Social movement.
Newspaper.
Yiddishkeit. Yiddishkeit. Radical. Yeah. Any? Second Avenue.
Yiddish theater.
Second Avenue Yiddish theater. Yeah. What else? Newspapers.
Food. Recipes.
Ah, I love that. Recipes. Sorry? Scholarship.
Self-help organizations.
Yeah.
Indian Benevolent Society, Workers' Circle.
Mutual aid.
The Landsmannschaft.
Yeah, self-help, all right. Landsmann. Everyone know what Landsmannschaften are? A Landsmann was your fellow countryman, and something that fascinates me, there were thousands, literally thousands of community-based, town-based, village-based Landsmannschaften, organizations of people from the same place that were a way of helping new immigrants find jobs, find partners, settle in. Very, very active, really as a sort of one-generational phenomenon. Anything else?
Contrast between the Jews and the indigenous population.
What was the first part of that?
The Jews.
Yeah, relations.
And the relationship between the indigenous.
Okay, so how do we express that? Well, relations, we know what that means. Okay.
Religious and Hasidic roots.
Yes.
Workers' rights,
Hasidic and... All right.
secular schools in New York, but also I think in Eastern Europe.
Yiddish secular schools, and what was...
Literature and authors,
Yeah.
women,
Okay, good.
Yiddish summer camps.
Okay, we'll leave it there. This is going to be women, and this is going to be summer camps. Okay, summer camps. All right. So part.
Latin America.
Okay, we'll squeeze Latin America in. Latin America. All right.
I have something. I don't enjoy Zoom, but like Zoom book chats.
Zoom book chats. Yeah. So
Not book club, book chats.
we'll just say Zoom. Okay. All right. And someone said anti-Semitism, and I'm going to leave it there because we could go on, obviously. Anti-Semitism. Okay. So the other part of this is, what do you think the challenges of bringing all these subjects, many of which are in the exhibit, to life in our setting at the Book Center? What are the issues? What are the challenges? What are the sort of things to be considered here? Yeah, limited space. Very good. Yeah. Issues to do with preservation. Yeah.
Accessibility for people who don't know Yiddish.
Right. Okay. One S, two S's, two S's. Accessibility for non-Yiddish speakers. Okay, others?
Accessibility for people who can't get here.
Right. So, in person versus online. Okay. Yeah.
Choices.
Selection. Yeah. Insurance. Susan, insurance. Insurance. Well, budget, obviously. All right, lots of good things there.
How about tech?
Tech, okay. Tech. Yes, limited space we've got. All right, again, we could go on and on. So, this is all good, and all these are things that we've been wrestling with, and there are many constraints, there are many things we would have loved to do but haven't been able to do. For all, any and all of those reasons. But, so what I'll do is leave these, that was a great list, thank you. Leave these things sort of in the background, and we'll refer to some of them as we go along. So the rest of what I want to do is a show and tell, which will answer to many of these things. But before we do that, Rachel, do you want to hand out our little schematic leaflets? And I'm going to add another one in here, which I think has been one of the most fascinating. So Rachel's just passing out this double-sided thing that we'll talk about. But one of the really fascinating things of getting this exhibition ready is this moment in time, because one of the exciting things is, I think, Many of us feel we're at a turning point in the sort of momentum and energy behind Yiddish studies. Tremendous numbers of translations are coming out. There are wonderful young scholars, many of whom have come through the Book Center. So there's a kind of explosion of creativity and knowledge. But at the same time, if we compare where we are with Yiddish culture to many other cultures, there's a tremendous amount we don't know. And that also became apparent. So the sort of, I'll say, the state of the field, for want of anything else, state of the field. Okay. So, so in terms of what this is physically going to look like, start with this one. And what you will find in October as you come down the ramp is a 60-foot mural of Yiddish land. And that is in two parts. There's the mural with sort of pictograms, moments, themes, and trends. And underneath it, there are 50 books that sum up another side of Yiddish land. In a way, there's the concept, the spiritual idea of Yiddish land that gave root to YIVO in 1925 in Vilna, when, you know, this sort of critical mass of intellectuals who realized that the culture was vanishing, the traditional culture, the Ansky expeditions and so on, you know, informed by that. But at the same time, there were tremendously well-qualified people. Some of them had 3 PhDs from European universities who were dedicated to saving and rescuing and exploring this culture, and that was statisticians and linguists and demographers and ethnographers. And the idea of Yiddish land really is at its peak in the 1930s as a spiritual concept, but also a reality in terms of where, you know, Yiddish speakers are at that point, and the idea of this global footprint, which is quite unique. Yiddish is not unique in being a global culture, of course, by any means, but the specificity of the Yiddish world, the Yiddish theater touring circuit to Kishinev, Odessa, Yas, you know, Lodz, Warsaw, Vilna, Lublin, and then you do Buenos Aires, and then you do Montevideo, and then you do Mexico City. So there are all these unique aspects to the global nature of Yiddish culture. So the idea of Yiddish land is front and center of how you come into the exhibit. And then we have, and the whole way we've conceived it is as a series of themed displays. And what we have in the front here are 5 themes, which are bestsellers, kind of popular fiction. What were people actually reading? Were they really reading my great-grandfather and Sholem Aleichem and people? Yeah, some were, and obviously they did, but they were reading in much greater quantities Shomer and Isaac Mayer Dieck and Bloistein and Avner Tannenbaum, a ton of people most of us had never heard of. So the two sides, the readers and the writers, you know, we've really tried to connect up throughout the exhibit, the consumers and the creators of the culture. So bestsellers, a section called Expanding Horizons, which really turns on its head the idea of Yiddish as antiquated, old world. No, Yiddish was the entry point to modernity for so many of our grandparents and great-grandparents. It was where you read your citizenship brochure. It was how you accessed things like this little book. This is what people were reading in the 1870s, Tausend und eine Nacht, which is 1001 Nights, translated into Yiddish, one of several translations, 1875, Vilna. So Expanding Horizons takes this idea of the language and the culture as a means of accessing all sorts of opportunities in the modern world, whether that's in New York, in Buenos Aires, coming from the village to the big city in Warsaw, and so on. Then we have women's voices. So a big principle of this exhibition is to put women back into the center of the Yiddish cultural story at every turn, whether it's in the theater, whether it's in literature, whether it's you know, in the experience of the Holocaust, whatever. So we do that, but I also wanted there to be a section that confronted the sort of glass ceiling for women writers and women editors and women journalists. And so we wrestled with what to call it. We were calling it women writers, and that somehow seemed wrong. We ended up calling it women's voices. So the idea is, how do you reclaim your voice as a major woman writer like Kadia Molodowski or so many others? So that's the third. What have I missed? Soviet Yiddish is another one, and modernism. The relationship between writers and artists and theater folk, you know, in the modernist sort of sweet spot of the 1920s, in Paris, in Buenos Aires, in Riga, many other cities. So those are 5 sort of core literature-based sections. And then we recreate the Perret Salon here. We'll talk more about that. And then you move to, in this space, we recreate the world of the Yiddish theater. We have a section on the Holocaust tucked in here that I'll talk about. Profiles 4 figures, 2 who were killed and 2 who survived. So we have Rochel Auerbach and Hirsch Fenster, 2 survivors who devoted the rest of their lives to the work of memory and research on the Holocaust, and then 2 who died is Mordecai Gebirtig, the singer, the Krakow carpenter singer, and who's, Rochel Brochus, fascinating. Rochel Brochus, a writer that I hadn't heard of until I kind of just caught on to the sort of tail, the hook of the story, and began to research her. She had an 8-volume collection of her stories prepared, ready to be published in Minsk in 1939. The manuscript was swept away, the books never appeared. She exists only in the form of one tiny stamp-sized photograph in terms of visual representation, which we've blown up into a big picture. But we've recreated as a sort of sculptural installation, a sort of ghostly representation of her 8 never-to-be-published books. So I find that a very moving part of the story. And there's more. Anyway, so this gives you a little more of a sort of close-up view of what it's going to look like. So, and now to the fun stuff, which is some of my favorite things. Okay, so we're going to race through these. How many of you have heard of Chaim Żytlowski? Hands up. Anchors. 1, 2, about 5, 6. Okay, this is tragic that so few people have heard of Chaim Żytlowski. Here he is. This is an original ink on paper micrograph. Was ist ein Mikrograph? A micrographic portrait is a wonderful Jewish folk art tradition that starts with rabbis' portraits in the 19th, 18th, and 19th century and transitions to a secular Jewish folk art in the late 19th, early 20th century. And Yiddish cultural heroes are celebrated by soifers, mostly. Most of the people writing micrographs are trained Torah scribes because they have this computer brain that can calculate how to arrange a picture through text like this. And so you have many portraits of Theodor Herzl, but you also have Sholem Aleichem and Peretz and the Yiddish cultural heroes. This was something I found quite by chance thanks to a Facebook post by the actor Shane Baker. Shane was in Tel Aviv, posted some pictures from his travels, and he was in the office of Leivik House. And in the background was something very interesting to me, which I expanded on my screen and saw it was a micrograph of Leivik, whom Leivik House is, super famous Yiddish poet and hero, activist. And I said to Shane, what's that? I need to know about this portrait. So he asked, and the portrait turned out to be by somebody I'd never heard of called Gedalia Tannenbaum. Turned out to be a Polish immigrant to Argentina. We have Narina Wysokowski from Buenos Aires with us, who has the world's biggest collection of Gedalia Tannenbaum's micrographs in her archive in Buenos Aires. Describes herself as the Buenos Aires answer to Aaron Lansky. But she has done remarkable work in saving left-wing Yiddish culture in Argentina and elsewhere. So Tannenbaum is a weaver, an industrial weaver, an immigrant in the 1920s from Poland. He's basically on the run from the Polish police. He's a radical. And for the Yiddishists among you, you can see his spelling of Chaim Żytlowski at the bottom is not the standard spelling. It's the Soviet-style orthography. Anyway, he developed this extraordinary talent for creating micrographic portraits, starting in the 1940s, and this is one of his first, memorializing Żytłowski, who had died 2 years before. And he never sold any of them. He created them for Yiddish institutions in Buenos Aires, schools, theaters, cultural centers, and the like. Yeah?
What do the words say?
The words are drawn from his articles, and that is typical of a micrograph. Typically, they're created, it's the word-made image. It's that you take the writers or the intellectuals or the activists' words and you create them into this extraordinary portrait. We will reveal on October the 15th exactly how many letters there are, because some poor soul here counted them. But there are a lot. Okay, so we could talk about this endlessly, but it's also, part of the reason that this has been such a hard journey is, okay, we found out about Gedalia Tannenbaum, then we found out his daughter was alive and well in Buenos Aires, then we found out she had some work, including this, but it didn't look like this. This portrait had been taken down when the school closed, the Żytłowski School in Buenos Aires. Somebody had torn it in two, thrown it into the trash, and it was only saved by a passerby who recognized it, took it out, and gave it in its two pieces, moldy, weather-stained, to the daughter, who has kept it until 5 years ago when she agreed to donate it to us. We then spent a year drawing up an agreement to ship it from Buenos Aires to here. We then spent 2 years conserving it. It looked nothing like this when it arrived. But I think it's a masterpiece of Jewish art. It's a quite extraordinary accomplishment, and it will be at the center of a section called Celebrities. So we are confronting the nature and the development of the idea of Yiddish celebrity, and this is the centerpiece. So it was a wonderful thing to be able to show. So also, tangentially to the idea of celebrities, we were fortunate enough to receive a wonderful sort of donation over many months of different things from the Peretz-Hirschbein family. So PH, Peretz-Hirschbein, this is the steamer trunk that Peretz-Hirschbein and Esther Shumiatscher, his wife, his poet wife, they were a celebrated literary couple, Hirschbein a playwright, a story writer, Shumiatscher a left-wing poet. They spent the entire decade of the 1920s as global immersive travelers. They lived in Soviet Crimea. They lived on an ashram in India. They spent months in China, months in Japan, months in New Zealand. They spent months in South Africa, many months in Buenos Aires. And so on throughout the 1920s, and their life was in this trunk. So this is the centerpiece of the Hirschbein exhibit, and really we wanted there to be something that made visible the extraordinary distances to which Yiddish writers and artists and personalities like Żytłowski went to meet audiences and bring their message. Żytłowski could pack out a 4,000-seat hall in New York and then go to Buenos Aires and do the same, and then go to South Africa and do the same, and then go to Europe and they would, the streets would be filled of people desperate to get in to see him. So that was the nature of their fame. So in addition to the trunk, we also have Peretz-Hirschbein's own copy of the poster for his film Grüne Felder. Yes, wow. Probably the most successful American Yiddish film, filmed a story set in the Pale of Settlement, set in the shtetl, but filmed in New Jersey, as most of them were at that point in the late 1930s. A love story between the orphan yeshiva student and the physically, very strong daughter of the rustic peasant Jewish family. So this is a typical Hirschbein plot. You bring together the worlds of traditional Hasidic, religious, Orthodox Judaism, which was Hirschbein's own childhood. His father was deeply religious. He grew up very poor in a mill, but went out into the world, as my great-grandfather did. They were exact contemporaries. But he had this sort of pantheistic Klal Yisrael vision of the Jewish people as one, whether it's in Crimea, whether it's on the Pampas in Argentina, whether it's, in the teeming Warsaw ghetto and so on. And so this play, this plot, the love story that unites, the weak yeshiva student with the sunburned farmer's daughter is a typical Hirschbein sort of device. And we also have, to go along with it, Esther's amber beads. Beautiful collection of amber beads, which we will string over the next 3 months. And they had a very serious interest in Chinese antiquities and Chinese culture. And so they brought back in the trunk things like this, which their daughter-in-law, Jessica Hirschbein, has donated to us. This is an inkwell that Hirschbein used. A quite extraordinary collection of Asian tsatskas, basically. Okay, on to the next one. I'm going to race through these. So this I love. Let's see. All right. Okay, so the question is, who is this? Molly, pick on. You're in the right ballpark. Theatre. Think theatre. Think stars of Second Avenue, stars of.
Bessie Tomaszewski.
No. Ida Kaminska? No. All right, put you out of your misery. You're getting close, and you'll get there. Celia Adler. Oh, sorry. I didn't hear you. Hankus got it. So this is, this is a sort of classic tale of how this exhibition has come together. I browse auction sites a lot, way more than is good for me. And I saw at Clark's auction house in Larchmont, New York, they were advertising 2 paintings by Ludwig Zatz. That was all it said, a portrait and a cafe scene by Ludwig Zatz. So that I sort of pinged, because Zatz was one of the great entertainers of the Yiddish stage and film, sort of vaudeville guy, song and dance guy, massive, massive celebrity, packed out Second Avenue theaters. So what's he doing? Is this the same Ludwig Zatz? Is it really him? And then I look at the picture, which they didn't name, and I immediately see it's Celia Adler. It's very recognizably Celia Adler. And so I sort of go crazy, and then I see the starting price is $75 for this portrait. So Susan will remember this. I go to Susan and say, Susan, we've got to buy this Celia Adler portrait at auction. She says, yeah, well, hang on. What's the starting price? It's only $75. Well, that's only the starting price. Could go way higher. I know, but, let's agree what we could bid up to. So I think we settled on $200 or something. Anyway, we got it for $75. So sad, because nobody was interested in Celia Adler painted by Ludwig Zatz. Anyway, it's just a wonderful story because Ludwig Zatz and Celia Adler, well, Zatz was in love with Celia Adler. They played together numerous times. He wanted to marry her. She refused him. He ended up marrying her sister, Lily. So when did he paint this portrait of her? What stage in that process? They remained friends throughout. I don't know. But anyway, so it's got a wonderful, wonderful story behind it. And it's extremely accomplished. And it turned out, when I read up, Zatz would play bohemian artists on stage and would paint on stage as he was playing the role of an artist. He would play an artist who got sent off to art school to try and come back as a successful painter. But all the while, he would be painting on stage. So, it's just a lovely, lovely thing to tell you about the versatility of the Yiddish theater actor, really. They were incredible people, incredibly versatile people. All right, so let's move on to the Peretz Salon. Why are we recreating the Peretz Salon? Well, partly it's just me being selfish, because I was always fascinated by the Peretz Salon, because my great-grandfather got his start as a writer in Peretz's apartment in Warsaw in 1899 and 1900, as did literally dozens, probably hundreds of other writers. So I think you can make a case, you can make a credible case for this being the single most influential laboratory of modern Yiddish culture. Peretz's salon, apartment in the center of Warsaw, which kick-started the whole sort of modernist moment in Yiddish culture, really, that flowers in the teens and 20s and 30s. And Peretz was this extraordinarily open-minded, youthful, curious guy who gathered all these writers and artists and musicians and theater people in his apartment and promoted their work, whether they were 15 or 25 or whatever, whether they were men or women. Finding the women of the Peret Salon has been a whole other odyssey. I was determined that we would not have a room full of men, but it's very hard finding pictures of some of them, and we've been unable to find. There are women, significant women writers who are part of the Peret Circle for whom no picture exists. And this, these are people around in the late 19th and early 20th century, but that's the sad reality. Anyway, we will recreate that experience of stepping over the threshold of the apartment, trembling with trepidation, to see the great writer and present your work to him. What else? How much time do we have? About 5 minutes or so. We have, I was very keen that we have these original items because really the starting point for this exhibition is to open up the books that we have and will have again on the shelves and explore their world and their stories and their creators. And that's difficult to do in many cases because the books themselves don't look very interesting. You can't just have an exhibition of words, you've got to have things and visual excitement. So we have the long-lost Holy Grail of Isaac Bashevis Singer Scholarship, which is his juvenile journal Salamandria, the Salamander, which was long thought to be lost. He created it in Bilgarai in the early 20s as a kid still wearing his kapota and his Hasidic cap. And he called in a favor from the local printer to print this on these stereotype mats. You can see one here. They used the backs of these prayer book mats that were lying around in the print shop to print Peretz's journal. Supposedly, it never appeared, it was never published, it was long thought never to exist, but these several dozen leaves, these stereotype mats, turned up in an attic in Bilgarai about 15 years ago. Crazy, a real story, crazy, real story, and thanks to the woman who was at the center of that find, we got some sent to us. What else? What else can I show you? We have, so one other key principle of this exhibit is to connect the world of the Pale of Settlement, a lot of these things that we talked about, to contemporary creators. That's a key principle throughout. So we have a section of Yiddish zines, sort of self-published pamphlets, art student-y type things. And thanks to a wonderful person by the name of Jay Sapper in Brooklyn, who was my sort of entry point into the world of Yiddish zines, these started sort of flying in droves, including this wonderful one dedicated to Irena Klepfish. Some of you will know, poet, activist, lesbian, radical, wonderful Yiddishist. And this student who took Jay Sapper's class in Brooklyn was so inspired by Irena's story, she created Die Kämpfer, the fighter, Kristen Morgenstern. And she not only created it, but when I got in touch with her, she said, "Oh my God, I'll send you the original." So she's sent us her life story of Irena Klepfish in, this sort of cartoon form, and it's wonderful. It's full of Irena focused her energies on work as a feminist writer and activist. The feminist movement placed special emphasis on the power of the individual and their identity. It takes you through her life in these beautiful double-page spreads. So that will be in a drawer in the press and politics section, full of the work of young creators like this. I'm going to run out of time. Did somebody say Holocaust? Did we have Holocaust there? Yes. Do we? Someone said it, yeah. I mean, this is such a great list, and honestly, we have a lot of it covered. Second Avenue Theatre, music. Resilience is a key theme throughout this exhibition. Summer camps we cover, comedy we cover, skip over multimedia. Anti-Semitism threads throughout. So, and obviously, I would have put in here as one of the key sort of challenges in a way, what do you do with the Holocaust and Yiddish culture, So, so we have a section, as I mentioned, that sort of squarely addresses, it's really in two parts. It's the Holocaust and it's Yizka books, Yizka Bicher, the memorial books produced in the decades after the war, maybe 800 or 900 dedicated to individual communities. of which we have a considerable collection. So, what we're doing throughout is mining our collection, highlighting the sort of great treasures that we have in this themed, coherent way. And so the Yizka books, which are, in large measure devoted to the impact of the Holocaust, they have these long sections of necrologies at the back. People use the pages as tombstones to family members who were killed in mass graves and, for whom there is no memorial. So they're fascinating, fascinating history. So we have a section about the Holocaust, but obviously the Holocaust comes throughout, threads through the exhibition. And one of my sort of obsessions is this couple called, Hankus will know well, Menachem Kipnis and his wife Zimra Seligfeld. And there they are at the top of this collection of populairste Volkslieder, the most popular folk songs of their repertoire, their joint repertoire. Kipnis, extraordinary character. He's one of the key photographers in the Pale of Settlement for the Forwards. He's the first Jew to sing as a staff member at the Warsaw Opera. He's a Mashoyera, a Chazen's apprentice. He's a key figure in interwar Warsaw intellectual Jewish life. But also, they were both extreme collectors of folk songs and folklore, and their apartment in Warsaw was a treasure house of Yiddish folk culture. Kipnis dies in the Warsaw ghetto. Seligfeld is murdered at Treblinka, and, everything disappears. So they come into a section called Saving a Culture. So that deals with maybe 12 organizations and individuals, everything from YIVO and the Ghetto Fighters Museum in Israel to kind of key people, Henry Sapoznik, and people like Kipnis and Seligfeld, who did extraordinary things as individuals to preserve and collect and save the culture that they were a key part of as creators. And we also will show in the journalism section this wonderful book that appeared just after the war, The Vanished World, which has Kipnis's pictures, Alta Katsizna's photographs, and Roman Vishniak's photographs, those three key photographers. So I think, should I stop? How are we doing? Do you want time for questions? We have about 10 minutes. Shall I show you one more thing? Okay, one more thing. Oh, I'll show you, by the way, if anyone is interested in this idea of what Jews were actually reading, get hold of this book, Yiddish Transformed, by Nathan Cohen, Natty Cohen, just come out. Sadly, super expensive, but get it through a library or buy it, whatever. He is the preeminent scholar of what people were actually reading, what Jews and Yiddish speakers were actually reading from, say, 1870 to 1930. And it's an extraordinarily important book for the field. Yiddish Transformed by Nathan Cohen. And I was mentioning about how women are a key feature of the exhibit. So again, we're at this moment. This came out recently in Poland, this work of a wonderful scholar, Joanna Lisek, Kol Isha, the voice of a woman, an anthology of Yiddish women's poetry. There's Catherine Hellestein's anthology, A Question of Tradition, Women Poets in Yiddish, 1586 to 1987. So all this sort of work we've been able to draw on and draw on the advice and knowledge and expertise of so many scholars, Hankus and others, in every area of this subject, it's just been a sort of pleasure to kind of put this thing together. I'll show you one last thing from somebody who's been extremely, really wonderfully helpful to me at every turn. Zachary Baker is the sort of godfather of Yiddish bibliographers. It's like if there were a film about a gathering of Yiddish bibliographers, he'd be at the top table, the head of the table, mafia style. Zachary's recently retired from Stanford. He was librarian at YIVO. Just a wonderful source of information about any Hebrew, any Yiddish question. He's writing on Yiddish theater now, mostly. He got in touch when he heard about the exhibition to say, David, I've been thinking about this. I have a piece of the granite facade of the AMIA building that was blown up in Buenos Aires in 1994, killing 85 people, wounding hundreds of people. and destroying a large part of the YIVO Buenos Aires archive. He said, I think you might want this for the exhibition. I said, I think we do. So this is it. This is brought over by Zachary to us. And so, you know, the fragility of this story of preservation and salvage, of which the Book Center is obviously, Aaron, such a sort of key part, is another thread that runs through this. This extraordinary, yes, the resilience, the sort of passion and dedication from people who understood the values and the importance of this culture and just were doing whatever they could to save it. All right, I'll stop there and take some questions. Thank you. And if you possibly can, do come and join us on Sunday, October the 15th, when we open. Have a whole day of celebrations. Yes?
This is something I like to share. My Brownie troupe met over the Parkway Theater in Brooklyn, which was a very famous...
Do you want to use the mic? Do we have a mic, Adrian? Or?
You can repeat the
Okay. All right. Sorry. Carole?
My Brownie troupe met over the Parkway Theater, which was a very famous Yiddish theater in Brooklyn. And we did not think of those people as stars. They were just working people. Then they would go to Dubras and they would sit in the cafeteria with the rest of us. But on opening night, they were stars. But at other times, they were just...
Right. Did everyone hear that? So the lady said her Brownie troupe met over the top of a Yiddish theater in Brooklyn, and you know that you would encounter the actors in the street and nobody thought anything of it. They were just everyday people, but then when the theater opened, they were stars, which was what I sort of caught glimpses of in London and fascinated me again, you know, how knitted into their communities all these Yiddish theater people and musicians and writers were. Very few of them. I mean, my great-grandfather was fortunate and, you know, had money at times in his life and was taken up by Putnam's and published and promoted. That was such a unique experience. It was very much a working-class culture. The Landsmannschaft and the self-help organizations, the labor movement, you know, these were sort of integral parts of it. When Grünefelder, the film, opened, the three newspapers, the Tog, the Morgen Freiheit, and the Forwards, all offered to sponsor the film. And Hirschbein and Ben-Ami and Ulmer turned each of them down because they knew if they took one, the other two wouldn't cover it. So, you know, the Yiddish theater depended on benefits that Landsmannschaften and these sort of societies would buy up whole evenings for. That's one of my regrets, is that we haven't maybe done justice to the world of the labor movement, which was such a sort of key part of Yiddish culture. But, you know, it's a limited space, and we can't get everything in. Recipes and food, again, you know, there's a little bit, but I know how popular that is with people, and I don't think we've got quite enough of that. But anyway, most of what you had on your list is in there, so that's good. Yiddish secular schools, very much so, yes. Latin America, yes, throughout. And the sort of pandemic moment in terms of Zoom, I think, has been very influential, and we draw on that in different ways. Any other questions? Yes?
What will be done with all that wonderful sheet music?
What will happen to all the sheet music that was there in the racks? So the sheet music is going back. What we've done is taken out... what is it, a third. So we've taken out each row, each side of the sheet music racks is in 3 sections. We've taken the middle section out, and they're going to be listening stations of curated playlists of songs. 4 people have done them, including Hanka Snetsky here. So you will be able to hear Hankus's 8 tracks, some explanation of why he thinks those are interesting and important. Lawrence Glamberg also, and a couple of others. But either side of those listening stations will be the sheet music, but we've sorted it out. The 3 fellows extraordinarily have done what no other fellows have been able to accomplish. It is create a reference collection for us of our sheet music. They have sorted through tens of thousands of copies of sheet music. We now have a core reference collection of 1,000 titles in albums in the vault. And we know what we have, so we know what we can and should be putting out as duplicates. It'll all go back, hopefully by October the 15th, but soon after if not. Lady at the back, yes, Arnie. Yes. To the second question, yes, we have begun to think about the sort of add-on programming and the online components, and that will be our focus once the thing is up and running. For children, I think we will create, you know, that there are, one of the things that's not going to be there on October the 15th, but will be there in a sort of soon to be accomplished second phase, is an introductory room called What is Yiddish that expands on the upper walkway panels. And so we'll have a blackboard there with lines for calligraphy and chalk for people to practice calligraphy. There's a typewriter that children can practice typing on, a 1940s typewriter. We'll have a whole display of 24 of our 45 Yiddish and Hebrew typewriters in our collection, but those will be on display with one interactive machine that will be very popular with children who, most of whom have never had a chance to type on a typewriter. And they look at this machine and think, what is that? So it comes with instructions about how you thread the paper through and how you make it work and how you don't screw it up and all that stuff. So at these different points, yes, and hopefully also some sort of kits for children to questionnaires and stuff to use as they take round. Yeah. Gentleman at the back. Yeah, I have the Wikipedia article printed out. You can come and take it. I think it was, yeah, I don't have all those details exactly. Are we out of time? One more? Oh, my goodness. The woman in front of the gentleman who just asked the question. Will there be a gift shop? Yes, merchandise. Yeah, Susan, will there be merchandise? There will. Yeah.
Certainly, look, there's a lot. I'm sure you can hear from what all David said. This is a huge lift for us, a huge and ambitious project. There are so many elements that we're going to use. This is a foundation for us. We'll have a virtual exhibit once we have a chance, once we actually open. We'll think more about what we should do with young people. We'll think more about what kinds of merchandise we can create. We're going to have a weekend course in the fall, which will focus on the Parrot Salon. That will be early November that David will be participating in. So this will be a foundation for us to do all kinds of programming. So I think this is really just the beginning, but we have to get to October 15th first. We're still standing at that point, and that's what's next.
Thank you so much. Thank you.